Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as we overwinter some plants. So let's go. I love overwintering plants, and I overwinter a ton of different plants many different ways. And I've shown you for the last many years my process for overwintering plants, checking on them during the winter months, and then waking each of them up. Well, I'm excited because of the 3 plants that we're going to be overwintering today, 2 of them are new to me. Therefore, it's going to be an experiment. This is a hanging basket that I got from my sister-in-law, Jen. And the plants in here are not hardy here where I live. They may be hardy in your area, but here they are treated as annuals. The first plant, a lot of times you might find it as a house plant. It's called Purple Heart. The second plant that we have here with the white flowers is called Diamond Frost Euphorbia. And then the third plant, it's tucked in the corner here. You can see that it has a slight red bloom to it, or a flower bud, and that's a type of Tuberous Begonia. The only plant in this mix that I've ever tried overwintering before, and I've done it successfully, is Tuberous Begonia. So the first step in this process is we're just going to go ahead and remove all the plants from this hanging basket. I am a firm believer that gardening is just one big experiment. I also believe that gardening can be fun, but it doesn't necessarily need to be expensive. And when you buy plants year after year, especially plants that you really like in your garden, that can cost a lot of money. Some experiments can be a success and other experiments might fail. But if you keep trying, some of those failed experiments can turn into a success. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these plants out of this hanging basket. So the first one I've removed is the Tuberous Begonia. A lot of times when it comes to trying to overwinter a plant, I will research it. I will look it up on the internet. I'll look at YouTube videos. I will read blog posts. And then based on that, I will try to see, okay, what situation works best for me? A lot of times with certain plants, you can just bring them in and overwinter them as a house plant. And maybe not only do you not have the space or the light, you might have house plants in your house and you don't want to introduce unnecessary pests. Or you have pets or children, and by bringing these type of plants in, it might not be a good situation. So you have to do what works best for you in your situation. I usually don't like to bring in a ton of plants and treat them as house plants because honestly, I like to have a break during the winter months, or at least for a few months before I do my seed starting. So I usually like to experiment by overwintering a lot of the plants in my garage. And when it comes to overwintering plants in the garage, some of the plants are overwintered bare root, other plants are overwintered inside of a container pot. And even though this is a container pot and I could overwinter these plants as is, the more container pots you have, the more room they take. So when it comes to overwintering plants in my garage, I actually prefer to downsize the container pot. And I like to focus on each individual plant because some plants need a little more attention than other plants. When it comes to the Diamond Frost Euphorbia as well as the Purple Heart, I'll be doing a little more research on each of those plants because certain plants will die if the temperature gets too low. And in my garage, it usually doesn't drop much more than like 38 or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So if these plants will die in that type of situation, there might be a chance that I have to add a space heater for a few days in my garage. Or I can bring the plants in just for a few days on those really cold winter days. Now that the plants have been removed, I just want to go over a few things. In the hanging basket, we still have some potting mix in there. I will be reusing the potting mix when I pot up some of these plants. The Tuberous Begonia is going to get overwintered bare roots, so we're going to be removing as much of the soil as we can from the roots. I ended up with 2 Diamond Frost Euphorbias. Both of them will be potted up into small container pots. And then I have 1 very large Purple Heart plant. That's also going to get potted up, and we'll see if we can divide that into a couple of pieces. We'll also be cutting back some of the top growth on the Purple Heart because it's gotten quite large. For the Tuberous Begonia, I'm just going to loosen up the soil that's at the base of it. There are a lot of different ways you can overwinter Tuberous Begonia. I could take this and put this in a container pot and basically just let the plant go dormant. So you would want to stop watering the plant while it's in a container pot with soil and just let the leaves die back. So it would look like a pot with just soil and nothing in it. And then eventually what would happen is the plant would start waking up in the late winter, early spring months. I've never done it that way. I've always overwintered my Tuberous Begonias bare root, which means not in a pot and not with any soil on the tuber. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. I would imagine, to be honest with you, it would be easier to overwinter it in a pot. But again, every time you have pots that you are overwintering, those take up a lot of room. I do have more detailed videos on how to overwinter Tuberous Begonias bare root. I will put links to those videos up above as well as down below. So definitely check those out. You can't tell, but the tuber is inside of here. It's a nice big tuber. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to let this dry out for a few days. After it dries out for a few days in my shed or my barn, maybe my garage, somewhere where it's a little bit cooler and drier, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it away for storage. I'll put it in a cardboard box with some peat moss, and I'll cover the tuber up. I'll label the box, and I'm going to keep it in my unheated garage. I will check on this once a month. I will push on it and just make sure that there's no rot happening. Here is the beautiful diamond frost euphorbia. Again, this is new to me. I've never overwintered it. We still have some nice weather, so I'm not going to be cutting this back quite yet. But once I bring it into my garage, which will be right before we get a frost, at that time I will go ahead and I will just cut it back really hard, because I don't want the plant to have to support all this top foliage. Instead, I just want to have the plant kind of go dormant and go to sleep. I have a pot here that I'm just going to reuse, and I'm going to put some of the potting mix that we had left over from our hanging basket. The potting mix is still wet, but in the end, I'll make sure I give all of these plants a drink of water, and I'll be keeping the diamond frost euphorbia as well as the purple heart on my side porch and enjoying them while the weather is still nice. If you wanted to, you could use fresh potting mix, especially if you're going to be bringing the plants indoors. But I always just reuse my potting mix. I don't treat it. I've never had any major issues when it comes to any sort of bugs or insects in my garage. If I was to bring this indoors, which I've never done and I don't plan to do, then what I would do is I would be using fresh potting mix, not used potting mix. I would be spraying this plant with insecticidal soap, and I would probably be putting this under a grow light or at least a very sunny window that's south facing. You'll have to let me know in the comments what your experience is with overwintering diamond frost euphorbia. Do you overwinter it in your garage or upstairs in a sunny area of your house? Do you have it under grow lights? That way it will help anyone else that's thinking of overwintering a diamond frost euphorbia plant. I'll be going into more detail this winter in terms of overwintering plants in my garage. But I will let you know that, again, before a frost comes, I will be cutting this back hard. I'm assuming that the plant will basically go dormant, the leaves will turn brown, the flowers will fall off, and then I will check it about once a month. I will give it the smallest amount of water because I don't want it to rot. It will definitely rot if I give it too much water, but I also have to give it some water. If I don't give it any water, it's going to dry out. Okay, now that we have this one diamond frost euphorbia potted up, I will be doing the same thing to the second one. When it comes to the purple heart or even the diamond frost euphorbia, could I come in and take cuttings to propagate more plants? I definitely could do that, but I'll be honest with you, I have so many other projects going on in my garden. I'm just focused on getting these plants ready for overwintering. But you could definitely do that. For example, you could come in, cut right here. You would want to strip off all of these bottom leaves, just keep the top leaves intact, and then put this in a glass or jar of water. And then after a few weeks, I'm guessing 2 or 3 weeks, this should produce some roots for you. Then at that point, you could go ahead and just pot this plant up with the new roots inside of some potting mix. And I'll tell you, if I can get this guy to overwinter in my garage, I will absolutely be propagating it. But for today, let's just go ahead. We're going to cut it all back, and then we're going to pot it up. There are many houseplants that are, I would call, more tropical, like this one, that you could bring outside during the summer months and then bring them back in, and they're a houseplant for you. I'm not worrying too much about cutting it down to a leaf node. I just want to cut it down so that it's not so floppy and it's a little more manageable. Now that we've really cut it back, I just want to take a quick peek, and I want to see at the base if I can divide this. I was looking around at the base if there was a logical place for me to try to divide this plant, and there really isn't, so we're just going to go for it. We're going to see if we can turn this one plant into 2 plants. I'm just going to use my Corona hand pruning saw, and I'm just going to try dividing right here. And any pieces that have fallen off, I can pull out. And as long as each section has some roots as well as top growth, it should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and divide it down more. I know that might seem silly, but honestly, that way I have smaller pots, smaller containers to overwinter. And for whatever reason, if I lose one plant, at least I'll have some extras. I'm just going to reuse the pots that I have again. I'm going to add some potting mix. If you live in a cooler area like I do, where Purple Heart is not hardy, you'll have to let me know, how do you overwinter it? I'm guessing a lot of people like to overwinter it as a houseplant, but also, have you ever overwintered it not as a houseplant? In other words, where it's kind of dormant in like a basement or a garage. Come December or January, when it's starting to get really cold here in New Hampshire, I do have the option of bringing this in from my garage, at that time treating it for pests. I can always spray it with soapy water, insecticidal soap. I can always change out the soil and then bring it inside and put it under my grow lights, or just bring it in as a houseplant. That's always an option. It is definitely the season for starting to overwinter plants. You can see on the porch, I actually have started overwintering some of my Diplodonia, and they are in smaller pots, so they are ready to go for the winter. But we still have some warm temperature, so I want to enjoy these flowers as long as I can. I've shown you in previous videos, my process has started for overwintering my geraniums bare root. I still need to do these ones. An experiment I'll be trying is trying to overwinter some of the petunias that I have. This is a Proven Winners petunia, and I'm just going to overwinter it in the garage. You never know. We'll see what happens. And here are some more plants that I'm planning to overwinter. Again, some more Proven Winner plants. And then we have more of the geraniums. I'll be taking those out soon. I have a variegated vine that I will be pulling out and overwintering that in my garage in a container pot. And then look how pretty that is. That's another Diplodonia that, again, it's not hardy where I live, but I overwintered it successfully in my garage last year, so I'll be doing that again. And then I'm just keeping these plants that we have potted up on the porch for right now. And if we have some nights that are going to get very cool, then these are going to get moved into my garage. You'll have to let me know what are some plants that you're overwintering and what is your process for overwintering those plants. I still have a lot more overwintering to do. And one of the things I love doing is doing a garden tour indoors in my garage and just showing you how are all the plants doing that I'm overwintering. There are always going to be successes and failures, but it's always one big experiment, and that's the beauty of gardening. I hope you're able to get out in your garden, and until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.